In this episode, we share quick updates you need to know on your federal and private student loans. Let's get started. Are your student loan payments or loan balances a major obstacle in your financial life? Then tune in and let's escape student loan debt. Hello and welcome to the Escape Student Loan Debt podcast. I believe this is the first newly recorded episode of 2026. Hope that you all are having a good journey with whatever goals you set for the new year and that you haven't quite given up on them yet. There's some that I set for myself that unfortunately have fallen by the wayside already. I'll tell you, this episode is not the most heavy-hitting episode in terms of things that will need to change on your student loans, but it is an important episode in terms of giving you updated progress on things like student loan forgiveness and the like. So this is something where I definitely think you should tune in and send to a friend if they are also on their student loan journey. These are quick hitting things, so we won't be here long. The first is an update regarding wage garnishments. So we've talked about in recent episodes the fact that if you have defaulted student loans, that you are at risk of having your wages garnished. In order to fall into default, that essentially means that you are 9 months late or longer on your federal student loans. And if you're in this situation, I cannot overstate how devastating it can be financially. Not only can the Department of Education garnish your wages, they can garnish your tax refunds, they can garnish Social Security checks. It prevents you from being approved for federally backed mortgages and loans, so you may not be able to apply for a home loan. Just a whole lot of negative circumstances that come with having your loans in default. There are also different ways you can get out of default. One of the ways is to pay off your loans in full. However, if you were in a position to pay off your loans in full, you probably wouldn't have been 9 months late on your payment. Another option is to consolidate your loans. So when you consolidate your student loans that are defaulted, what happens is it restores your ability to take on new debt. It restores your ability to sign up for different repayment plans with that debt. What it doesn't do is it doesn't remove the defaulted status from your student loan as it's listed on your credit report, but that is an option. Another option is to what's called rehabilitate your loans. With rehabilitation, you go through this formal process where essentially for 9 or 10 months, you make payments on an income-driven repayment plan. And once you have rehabilitated your loans, you have all of your rights restored and the defaulted status is removed from your credit report, although the late payments will remain. So there's a lot of back and forth over whether it's really that big of a deal to go through rehabilitation when the late payments do still remain. But whatever you choose, prior to the Department of Education's announcement, you could only go through rehabilitation one time. If you did it once and they fell back into default, then you just missed your opportunity and you were stuck with either consolidating your loans or paying them off in full. As a part of this announcement, which we're putting on screen, they are choosing to delay, the Department of Education, the involuntary collections, as they call them, on federal student loans. In reality, I think that it's because they just don't have their systems up to date to process these garnishments. I also think politically it looks terrible in light of the affordability crisis to then double down and start garnishing people's wages. But of course, in the announcement, they blame the fact that it's all the things that the Biden administration did wrong and these people didn't think they had to repay their loans, and to be gracious, they're deciding to delay them, right? So whatever the reason is, they have decided to push back the delay. In the announcement, they reference that they want to push it back until some of the changes that they have in store are put in place. From what they mention, it seems like they're referring to things like the repayment assistance plan being unveiled. So hopefully you're not in default at all, and there's no guarantee, but from the implication, it sounds like they're going to push off garnishment until the repayment assistance plan has been established and released, which projections for that plan have been put at June or July of this year. We'll see when that actually comes to fruition. So first update, wage garnishments for defaulted student loans have been put off. The next update, which is something that I think is a real negative for people who are pursuing forgiveness under income-driven repayment plans, is the seeming death of the forgiveness tracker. And this is something that we only got the benefit of for a very small period of time. If you have federal student loans and you at any point have worked for a nonprofit or government entity and had that employment verified, you are well aware that there is already a public service loan forgiveness tracker on studentaid.gov. And when you log in, out of the 120 qualifying payments that you need under that program, it will literally show you, like on a table or graph format, and just numerically, here's how many credits you've already earned. I have 43 out of 120. I have whatever out of 120. And it's a good way to have an idea of not just how close you are, but how close the Department of Education thinks you are. So that if those numbers don't match, you can do some digging and figure out how can I get them to give me credits that I'm owed. It has been much more difficult to figure out how much credits you have in the system for general forgiveness under income-driven repayment plans. So those are plans like income-based repayment, pay-as-you-earn, formerly the repayment assistant or revised pay-as-you-earn, So there wasn't much insight that you could glean because there was no piece of information that showed you what they had on file. Do they think that I'm 20 payments in to the 240 that I need? Do they think that I'm 80 payments in? How do I check that information? Well, for a very brief period, I mean like a few months, the department had a tracker on studentaid.gov where you could go and you could see, even for general forgiveness, how close you were. And then almost as quickly as it was released, it was taken away by this new administration. And part of the reason that they took it away, and I will say that I disagree with why they're taking it away, but I understand their rationale, is they use a different set of metrics for what counts as a payment towards forgiveness than the Biden administration. There were all types of things when it comes to things like forbearance and deferment, where prior to a couple of months ago, the Department of Education under Trump had a different interpretation of whether that payment counted than how the Biden administration was handling those plans. There was also a different interpretation between the two administrations when it came to consolidated loans. With the Biden administration, if you consolidated two loans that had varying amounts of forgiveness credits prior to the consolidation, when you consolidated, they would give you credit for that new loan based on the weighted average of the credits that each of the original loans had before the consolidation. And it was heavily weighted towards the loans where you owed the most money. So for example, let's say that you have a loan that is $200,000 and you have 5 years worth of forgiveness credits on that loan, and you consolidate it with a $10,000 loan that had 19 years worth of credit. It doesn't matter if that loan was like a year or 6 years from forgiveness, because it's so much smaller than the $200,000 loan with 5 years credit. The weighted average for that new loan would go much closer to the 5 years than it would to the 19 years. That was how it worked in the Biden administration. However, from what we know, based on the Trump administration's going back to the original rules, if you consolidate student loans right now, you lose all credit and you start from zero. So if they're looking at those two interpretations and they're trying to figure out how much credit you have, well, they disagree if it's a consolidated loan. They disagree if it's a loan that has extended periods of forbearance and deferment. Now, we still haven't gotten more positive news on how they treat consolidated loans. We did get positive news in that they are going to give credit towards those extended periods of forbearance and deferment as a part of some of the settlements that they've recently entered into. But that was their rationale behind why they took the tracker away. And we were hoping that once they clarified how much credit each borrower had, that they would put that tracker back online. However, if you're looking on screen, you are seeing the Department of Education basically saying that that tracker is probably dead. It's not coming back. So until they do away with this loophole, we are stuck with the Reddit loophole, for lack of a better phrase, where people on Reddit have found a way to essentially use a backdoor link to go into literally the back end of the Department of Education system to figure out how much credit they have on file. So we're going to put a link to that, backdoor option so you can see where you stand. But if you're waiting for a path other than that link to log on and be able to see how much credit you have, it sounds like the forgiveness tracker for studentaid.gov is officially dead.
You're listening to the Escape Student Loan Debt Podcast.
Subscribe now at escapestudentloandebt.com.
Welcome back.
All right, welcome back, and let's get to the next topic, which is that the Department of Education has and student loan servicers have finally removed the partial hardship for income-based repayment plan. As a quick recap, to describe it as simply as possible, with an income-driven repayment plan, when you sign up, you're supposed to be paying based on a percentage of your earnings. Now, there's also a type of payment plan that's not an IDR plan, that's just a standard 10-year payment plan. If I sign up for this plan, 10 years later, based on what I paid, I should owe $0. Now, what a partial financial hardship meant was that if I sign up for, say, the income-based repayment plan, and they compare what my loan payment would be after their calculation with what I would pay on a standard 10-year payment plan, I have to prove that I would save money by signing up for the income-based repayment plan, right? If I'm going to pay $1,000 a month on a 10-year plan, I have to prove that I would be paying less than $1,000 a month if I were accepted and signed up for IBR. And if I can't prove that, if it would save me money to be on the 10-year option, they just won't let me sign up for income-based repayment. Another option would be, let's say that when I started income-based repayment, I did have a partial financial hardship. And then based on my income increasing over the years, I reached the point where I'm not saving money anymore. It would cost me less to be on the 10-year standard plan. In that scenario, they wouldn't kick you off the plan. So you would still be on income-based repayment. You would still be getting credit towards forgiveness, but they would lower your payment to the 10-year standard payment. That's how it worked prior to the removal of the partial financial hardship. The reason this was important is because they are reducing the number of income-driven repayment plans available, so that after the middle of 2028, the only options that you'll have will be the old and new versions of income-based repayment and the repayment assistance plan. So it didn't make much sense to have a barrier to people signing up for income-based repayment when it was going to be one of the only options available. However, when people started signing up for the plan, they kept getting denied because of the partial financial hardship requirement, even though the department said that they were going to take it away. They essentially apologized and said it's taken a lot longer for our systems to be updated to remove it than we thought. And because of that, there's been a back and forth over when this will be released. And finally, it seems like that hardship waiver has been removed. So if you had your student loan application denied in the past few months when you tried to sign up for income-based repayment, if you go and try again, this time it should go through. So partial financial hardship finally removed from income-based repayment applications. When it comes to the fate of the SAVE plan, we did a whole episode on this. The SAVE plan is definitively going away. It's just a matter of when, not a matter of if. And the department has already shared that for borrowers who are still on SAVE, they will be moved on to a new plan of the department's choosing, which is why in the episode where we covered this announcement, we gave examples of people who should just stay and let the department figure it out, and people who should maybe take action before the department takes action for them. As a recap, if you are eligible for the new version of income-based repayment plan and you're currently on SAVE and are appreciating not having to make a payment, I would probably just stay put. The rationale for that is the new version of income-based repayment is the most forgiving of all the available options. So it has a 10% of discretionary income payment requirement, and any remaining loans are forgiven after 20 years worth of payments. It would make sense that if the department is going to move you off of the SAVE plan, that they're going to move you onto one of the options that's going to exist beyond 2028. And because new income-based repayment is one of those options, that would likely be where the department pushes you. And since it's a great plan, I think you can either move if you want to, but even if you choose to stay put, you'll likely end up just fine. Another group that doesn't necessarily have to act, but it's unfortunately because they just don't have a better option, are people who are only eligible for the old version of income-based repayment. So comparatively, the payment for old income-based repayment is 15% of your discretionary income as compared to 10%, and you have to pay for 25 years instead of 20. So it's not as good of an option. And if you are someone who is eligible for only old income-based repayment, it essentially means that you have loans that you borrowed before 2007 or so. It's not quite as black and white as that. We'll put a link to the guide to income-based repayment plans that we've released so you can check the exact dates. But essentially, if you have loans that you took out, around that date, before that date, well before that date, it's likely that when you are moved from the SAVE plan, you're moved into that old income-based repayment plan option. It's not a great option, so I don't know that I would be in a rush. You might choose to just wait for the department to move you instead. Lastly, this is the group that does need to make a move before the department moves for you, are people who are not eligible for new income-based repayment, but they are eligible for pay-as-you-earn. Why is this the case? The pay-as-you-earn plan is the same payment structure as new IBR. It's 10% for 20 years. The difference is the eligibility. So if you want to know who would be eligible for pay-as-you-earn but not eligible for new IBR, to be eligible for pay-as-you-earn, it means that you were considered a new borrower on October 1st, 2007. So that means you either took out your first loan after that date, or you had paid off all of your previous loans and took out a new loan after that date. And you also have to have taken out a loan after October 1st, 2011. Those are the rules for people who want to be eligible for pay-as-you-earn. So if you meet those requirements, you would be eligible for pay, but you wouldn't be eligible for new IBR, because for new IBR, you have to be considered a new borrower after July 1st, 2014. So it's a really narrow window, but the reason it's important to know this window is because with pay-as-you-earn, that plan is eventually going to go away. Sometime between now and July of 2028, it will be gone. So since it's the best payment plan available, but it won't always be available, it is unlikely that if you stay put, the Department of Education moves you onto a plan that they know they're going to phase out. This means that it will be more beneficial for you to take the reins and sign up for the plan on your own, rather than waiting for SAVE to be officially closed, and then it's harder to get into pay-as-you-earn. Now, when it comes to all of those income-driven repayment plans, you probably want an update on forgiveness if you're close to it. Not much great news here unless you are applying for public service loan forgiveness. If you're applying for public service loan forgiveness, every month the Department of Education is giving an update on their progress towards processing forgiveness under various plans. They are still humming along quite well under public service loan forgiveness. However, when it comes to income-driven repayment plan forgiveness for the other plans, they are moving at a snail's pace. As a matter of fact, not only are they moving at a snail's pace, they are not even forgiving loans that have met their requirements under the pay-as-you-earn or income contingent repayment plan. They're doing more mealy-mouthed stuff about, oh, it's a systems thing and it's because of all these court cases. In reality, they could find a way to do it. They're choosing not to. It doesn't necessarily mean that if you're already eligible for forgiveness that you need to just move your loans onto income-based repayment. And the reason I say that is because they're making even slower progress on processing the applications for people trying to get on income-based repayment plan. As a matter of fact, they're moving backwards where they're getting more applications and more requests for that program and public service loan forgiveness buybacks than they're actually processing on a monthly basis. So not much for you to change in this scenario, more just an update of the fact that if you are waiting for forgiveness, unfortunately, you may have to wait a good bit longer. I will say, however, if you're in that scenario where you feel like you're eligible and they just haven't processed your loans, you can put your loans into forbearance while you wait for your application to be addressed. So it's not a matter of, hey, I just have to keep paying even though they haven't checked my application. If you do decide to keep paying, the good news is any overpayments that you made that weren't required past your date of forgiveness will eventually be refunded to you, although it can take, as you would expect, quite a while. The last update that I have for you today is one to just keep your eye on things. I try as best I can to keep politics out of these conversations, but the fact of the matter is there's a lot of things going on with international politics right now, as you are well aware of. And unfortunately, when you start to attack allies and threaten tariffs and things of that nature, it can lead to inflation. Inflation can lead to an increase in interest rates. If you have private student loans or you have federal student loans that you are interested in refinancing, that could lead to an increase in private student loan interest rates. So if you have been considering it, but you are on the fence, I would tell you to probably look a little closer or act a little faster than you were planning to, because if this continues over the next few months, I would not be surprised to see an undoing of some of the progress that we've seen in lowering the interest rates for things like mortgages and things of that nature. And if that were to happen, private student loans would be sure to follow. So I know that those were some quick hitting updates, a lot of information, not a lot of action that needs to be taken, but but definitely still things that you need to know. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with more information to have your federal student loans or private student loans reduced, forgiven, reorganized, or expedited, and I hope to see you then. From Escape Student Loan Debt, this was the Escape Student Loan Debt Podcast, a show for established professionals whose student loan payments or loan balances are impacting their marriage, their business, their credit, or their dream of achieving homeownership.